All right, we are going to kick off. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I see we've already got a number of participants signed up and we're super excited to have you here. I see the chat is coming alive, lots of people engaging. I encourage you to please drop any thoughts you have into the chat and engage with each other. We're going to try as much as possible to also engage during our presentation. Reminder, you can use the Q&A if you have any questions that you would like to specifically have answered at the end. But if you want also free flow and drop chat, sort of thoughts in the chat as you go along, please feel free. This is a community event and we're here to learn and grow together. So as a reminder, today, please switch off your technology. I'm going to go ahead and put my phone on airplane mode so we don't get distracted. You're welcome to close all your other browsers and focus for this intense hour that we have together. Of course, this is the gift of presence. That's why it's called a present. It's like a gift, and we're going to spend it together. All right, so I'm going to start off by briefly introducing my delightful co-host, Asanda. Asanda Daraza is the co-founder of Khwela Womxn, and the two of us started together in 2018. And this came from Asanda following her passion for travel and for women empowerment. So Asanda grew up in the rural Eastern Cape, which was not an easy ride for her. She didn't have access to many opportunities, support, and information that is needed to succeed in life. However, after graduating with her bachelor in social work, she got exposed to tourism industry, and there she fell in love with serving and meeting new people. And she learned that travel is truly transformative as it broadens one's mind. One of her values is continuous growth and lifelong learning. And I experience that with Asanda all the time. Out of the two of us, I'm the one with the terrible temper. I'll be the first to admit I have anger issues, and if something's not going my way, I tend to explode. And Asanda's the first one to always be like, Kim, what are you learning out of this? Let's step back a bit. So she lives that value every single day, I can tell you that. Asanda is pursuing her studies as a life coach with the Co-Active Training Institute, and I'm really grateful to have you here today. Thank you, Asanda.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kim, for that beautiful introduction. And I just want to say to everyone, hello, Molweni, Dumelang, Goeiemorgen. I'm just trying to fit in all the languages there. Thank you. That was really beautiful, Kim. Yes, as Kim has mentioned, we started together, and just a little bit on Kim as well, like a beautiful introduction for Kim is that she also is a co-founder of Khwela. Alongside that, she's also co-founder of Once Travel, and she founded Ubuntu Beds in 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic. And she's spoken because she's like such a great speaker. When you get to know Kim, you see how passionate she is about speaking and standing in front of people. So she has spoken at global events, including the United Nations World Tourism Organization. And, you know, at the time, she also found time while she was running all these businesses to complete an executive MBA from the UCT Graduate School of Business in 2020, which was such an amazing journey to see her on. And she also has won numerous entrepreneur awards, including the prestigious Sanlam and Business Partner Entrepreneurship of the Year Award, Premier's Award for Entrepreneurship, and Mail and Guardian 200 Young Leaders. So for me, working alongside Kim has been a blessing. I'm not gonna lie. It's been a total blessing. There's been so much learning from her, and she's really a great coach. As I'm pursuing my coaching, I'm learning so much from her as a coach and as a leader. So as I've said before, I'm truly blessed, manyan, to be working alongside such a beautiful spirit. And I'm also excited about today. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, so let's jump in. Now that you know who we are, let's jump in a little bit. All right, so we're going to start off with a quick barometer check-in, right? And that is, how are you feeling right now? So go ahead and click one of the ones that most speaks to you. All right, and Griselda is going to open up the results. All right, we're 70% there. Please go ahead and click how you're feeling so that we can publish the results. We want to know where you're at. 80%. Okay, guys, we're almost there. 90 and 100. Let's do it. Let's do it. All right, I'm going to count to 10, and then as Griselda, we're going to publish the results. Get your answers in. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and all right. Amazing. So we have a lot of openness. Curiosity is the biggest one. Energetic, excited, confident, connected, anxious and worried, also there, down, depressed and stressed. All right, so thank you for sharing so deeply with us. We're going to include this a little bit later and share why we think sharing your emotions is so important. All right, so I'm going to jump in. And today we are talking about working in a male-dominated workspace. Now, how did we come up with this topic? We didn't. You did. We asked women, what do you want to hear about? And this was one of the topics that came forward. And so we thought, you know what? Let's create some content around it. So first of all, let's understand super quickly, what does it mean? Right? So a male-dominated workspace is a space of work where there are less than 25% females. So this might be at any level, might be in a very technical organization, like, for example, car mechanic or something that is traditionally seen as very male. It might also be in a very female sort of prevalent industry like tourism, but at the very top, like, for example, at board level, there's very little female representation, which would also describe that space as a male-dominated space. All right, let's move on a little bit to understand exactly what does it mean to be discriminated against. So when we're talking about male domination or discrimination, what does this mean? So the law defines it in 3 broad strokes, and these broad strokes are discrimination, harassment, and victimization. And I got this little image because it really, for me, summarizes like how one feels in that moment when one is, feels like a victim or is harassed. So what does it mean to be discriminated against, right? So discrimination is direct or indirect. So for example, it might be something to do with your gender, your race, or your age, or it might be indirect. So for example, in some organizations, they might say, we're going to hire a tea lady. And there's no logical reason why the person who's serving tea should be a lady. That person could also be a man. Or, for example, in some industries, they might say, we have a height restriction, and that height restriction is not logically linked to the job at hand. So, for example, if you're an air hostess, you have to be a certain height, and that's linked to the fact that the bags are high, right? So there's a logical correlation. But in some industries, there might be a sort of random rule that we only hire tall people, in which case everyone who's short is discriminated against. So other examples include, for example, hey, we're hiring a tech guy, but it doesn't actually need to be a tech guy. It could also be a tech woman, for example. So this is where somebody is treated differently or worse than another employee due to underlying reasons, and often reasons that they can't help. The next type of discrimination is harassment. So this is bullying, spreading rumors, or sexual harassment. So this is when somebody is conveying negative behavior towards a fellow employee, which humiliates, intimidates, or excludes them. So this type of discrimination is a violation of someone's dignity and creates a toxic working environment for that person. And it might be subtle. For example, a few years ago, there was a medical student in Cape Town who was a female, and she's Muslim. Brilliant student. But she felt excluded because part of the work culture was drinking after a shift. And so you were only invited to come to the bar and to be part of the team if you were prepared to drink alcohol. Being Muslim, she wasn't, it was against her religion. And so she was excluded from promotions and sort of all these good things that come from teamwork. Finally, the last is victimization, okay? So victimization is where somebody becomes a victim of harmful behavior because they have raised an area of discrimination. So for example, if you put your hand up and you say, I didn't like what happened there because I felt discriminated, it very often happens that that person or the whistleblower is victimized, which perpetuates the whole cycle and makes it very difficult. All right, so now that we understand just a little bit about discrimination and as a basis and what it means to have a male-dominant work environment, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into gender bias. And I've become really, really, really fascinated about this topic. Recently, Asanda and I did some work with Ian Furr, who's an incredible, incredible thought leader on workplace synergy. And he taught us a lot about this principle. So I'm going to ask you to, I'm going to give you a little story, and I want you to come up with the answer for me, please. So a father and son are in a horrible car accident, and the car crash kills the dad immediately. The son is rushed to hospital, and just as he's about to go under the knife, the surgeon comes in and says, I can't operate. That boy is my son. How is this possible? And you can go ahead and write the answer into the chat. And Asanda, you're not allowed to answer because you know the answer.
I was so ready to answer.
All right, amazing. So the surgeon is a woman. Well done, Wilma. You got it, and Minentle as well. So you'll be surprised to know that the world around, people often answer things like, the Lord exists, the father came back to life, or the sons got good gay parents, there are two fathers. And so this just shows how globally our biases show us that men are professionals. And so when we see or we hear a professional, we think that they are men by inference. As an example, Nelson Mandela in his book talks about his anxiety of flying for the first time with a black pilot, where he said, where the pilot came on the loudspeaker and said, we're flying to Cape Town. And he was like, oh Lord, am I going to make it? And he had to stop and check his racial bias. And this is the man who fought almost his entire life against racism. So biases exist within each and every one of us. Yeah, you see, it's and you're not, and so many people do think that that the parents are gay or something. All right, so let's dive a little bit more into gender bias. And remember what I said about Nelson Mandela now. It exists within each of us, and it's not a bad thing. It is, the consequence is always not always positive, but bias just exists. It just is something that we have within us. It's the way in which we view the world. And the worst thing we can do is judge people for that bias and get angry with them. Because if someone's angry at me, the only option I have is to defend. And I believe that a lot of these uncomfortable sort of conversations go wrong because people feel like they're under attack. So remember, gender bias is within each and every one of us. And even though I am very much for women and women's rights, I have a gender bias, and I have to catch myself often and be aware of that. All right, so a quick definition. Gender bias is the tendency to prefer one gender over another. It's a form of unconscious bias, so I'm not aware of it, or implicit, which occurs when one individual unconsciously attributes certain attitudes and stereotypes to another person or a group of people. These ascribed behaviors affect how the individual understands and engages with others. So for example, I might say, women are kinder, women are more gentle, women are better parents. And similarly, I might say, men are better at business, men are stronger, men can think clearer, women are too emotional. So here I'm attributing certain characteristics to certain genders without really getting to know the individual. Like perhaps there's a very kind and caring father who's excellent as a parent. And I haven't taken that into consideration. I've merely taken my view of the world and what I believe to be true without getting to know that individual. All right, so another word of saying, another way of understanding gender bias is gender stereotypes, or some people might call it sexism. So they're all kind of related to this simple premise that we have inherent biases that we believe to be true. So how does this play out in South Africa? Sometimes when we discuss these sensitive topics, people get defensive because they feel that they're being attacked, which is logical. I also defend when I feel like I'm being attacked. But let's have a look at the numbers, okay? Let's have a look at the data. So this is a recent sort of study that was done by Oxfam, and it really talks to the Gini Inequality Index, where South Africa still is one of the worst and most unequal places in the world. So it looks at it from a few perspectives. Like, for example, if you are a white man, you are more likely to be employed than if you are a person of color, a black man. If you are a white woman, you are more likely to be employed than if you are a black woman, statistically, okay? Now, what I find interesting is look at how many more men are employed than women on both sides, whether you're white or black. Now, to take this a step further, what does this mean for wages? Okay, so the average monthly earning for a black woman is 2,500 Rand, where the average monthly earning for a black man is 3,200. So you can see that a black woman earns 24% less than a black man, and she earns 75% less than a white woman and 81% less than a white man on average. And you might say, well, but they're more, the ratios are different, but this is on average. So we're taking an average, and South Africa is more or less 50-50. Let's just say it's 50-50 male, female. So this is data, this is hard information. And what it is showing us is that for some reason, inequality is not yet there, right? And we have to accept that we've got a long road to go, but every conversation like this is part of, understanding and curating better workspaces so that we can move forward. So I'd love to dive into a very brief history of why, like, gender equality and gender in the workplace. And because we're in South Africa, it's quite difficult to do that without talking about apartheid. So you will see that my story is a little bit interwoven. And I love telling historical anecdotes because it makes me realize how much has changed in the last 100 years. And it gives me so much hope for what we can still achieve in our lifetime if we work together. All right, so let's wind back to the 1880s. Now, the 1880s was the beginning of the UK sort of movement of women. It was called the women's suffrages. And they were really starting to protest about the fact that women could not own property, that women could not vote, that women could not have a bank account, that women could not work. And all these rights that we sort of have now were not there. And there was a long line of women demonstrating and like causing vandalism, going to jail, getting killed in the name of those rights. But interestingly, while the women in the UK were very, very pro-women's rights, they were not pro-racial rights. So they were very, very pro-white women having those rights, but not women of color. So it's interesting because when we understand that someone is, when we consider someone to be liberal and sort of pro something, we assume they might be pro everything. But every person is individual and has biases. And so you may be working on your gender bias, but still not working on your racial bias, or the other way around. So let's take it forward to the 1950s. In South Africa in 1956, we have the famous Women's March to Parliament. And this was mainly against the pass books. And it was one of the first big movements since 1948, when apartheid officially sort of came in, that women got together of various races and backgrounds, and they marched to Parliament against the pass laws. And it was monumental. We still celebrate, we still celebrate every year 9th of August as a public holiday because of that march. But I wondered, like, what would it be like to actually be a woman in those times? Like, what was it actually like day to day? So I had a look at some of the magazine sort of advertising from exactly that era, from the 1950s. And this is what it looks like. This is the kind of thing that you would find when you're flipping through, You Magazine or Huisgenoot or something like that, right? So show her it's a man's world, it's a Thai advertisement. Or if your husband finds out you've been store testing for fresher coffee, and there's a picture of the husband giving the wife a big doner. And those are the times. It was not yet illegal to beat up your wife. Those were literally how women were living in those times. I had a look at this this cover of Drum magazine, and I had a look at a few of them. They weren't much better. I mean, it was literally like women in bikinis, women being measured up. And when I saw that image, I was like, what? 1950? That's only 60 years ago. Like, how 70 years ago? How are women objectified like this? And actually has much changed. And it really, that image made me think back. When I saw that image of Drum, it made me think of Sarah Baartman. Made me think of this woman who is taken to Europe and measured up and seen differently. And how does she measure up to other women? And I just thought, that is so crazy. Like, imagine that today. Imagine taking a picture of a man and being like, let me measure his waist and let me measure his butt and let me see how he compares to other men. And yet it seems so normal for us, for women, to be like, oh yeah, I'm not as thin as her, or or my butt's not as big as Kim Kardashian. And we're compared, but that is something that is reserved mainly for women. And what does that make women do in the workplace in terms of measuring ourselves up in front of others, in terms of always comparing and doubting whether we're good enough? All right, fast forward to the 1980s. This is actually the era I was born, but at the time, this is the cover of magazines in the USA, right? Oprah Winfrey is making it. She's the first woman on TV. Like, she's like really still rising. And at the same time, this is how women of color in South Africa are portrayed. Like, I looked everywhere, and the closest I came was Generations, which was only started being produced in the 90s, where, like, are women of color ever portrayed in the media holding a briefcase? Or just anything that shows that women have a place in the workplace? No, they didn't. I found a book called Working Women of South Africa, and I was like, yes, I've got it. I'm going to I'm going to page through this book and I'm going to see like all these women who are actually like, you know, working and whatever. And the entire book is about domestic workers, factory workers, and very, very low entry jobs. And I was once again reminded that was our reality in the 1980s in South Africa. The only page that shares a little bit more about sort of women and how they're gaining is when it starts talking about the political movements, like the way that women started stepping up within the trade negotiations, within the trade unions, within politics. And that, you know, really led me down a rabbit hole of women's part in the struggle and how they stood up for activism and all these kind of things. So this is a picture from 1984 in London, where women were rallying together to force sanctions against South Africa. And yeah, so this is a meeting of the ANC and some other people. So women were really pivotal in moving apartheid, moving out of apartheid and raising their voice against apartheid. And when we look back, there's so many stories about women uniting and facing this thing together. But what does it mean now? Like, where, after all that, after we've come so far, I showed you that image earlier of women where they are today at the workplace. Like, it's still not good enough. And that fighting spirit of like, this is what we believe in, this is what we want to achieve, is still there. And yet, like, how can we harness that to make a real difference and a real change? So I wanted to give you one more example about gender and racial bias. And I gave you the context before. Coming from South Africa, we cannot exist in workplaces without identifying that gender and racial bias is important. It is uncomfortable, and it's so awful to speak about, because it makes people feel guilty and shameful and angry. But if we don't talk about it and understand it, and if we don't create spaces where conversations are okay, then this sort of cycle will perpetuate and the anger will build. All right, so a little bit more about gender and racial bias. One of my, big heroes in literature is Steve Biko, and I've taken the time to read many of his books this year and really understand Black consciousness a lot better. And this is a picture of him with his wife, Nsiko Biko. On the left, this was while he was studying med school, and on the right, that was just after he was killed. But what many people don't know about Steve Biko is that he was obviously instrumental in thought leadership around anti-apartheid movement and the Black consciousness. But he also, for many, many years, had a relationship with Mampela Rambele, who went on to become an amazing, some would say amazing, some would say not so amazing politician. And just after Steve Biko died, she gave birth to their son, Khwela Biko. And Khwela Biko is their son. But what was interesting about Steve Biko was that while he was very much against apartheid and very much for human rights, he did not really support women. And he didn't really, support his wife through their marriage, as well as his mistress. And it's something that people touch on when they write biographies about Steve Biko. And it's something that is not often spoken about. But when I read that, I thought, there it is. Like, there are 180 different biases, and we cannot be perfect. Every person is not perfect. So even the most instrumental sort of thought leaders during apartheid who made huge strides and put their life in danger and even died for the cause, had biases against women. And it's all a work in progress, and no one is perfect. So going back to Khwela Biko, he's also an incredible thought leader, author. He writes about the intertwined love story of apartheid and how Black consciousness has affected the youth today. And yet he was also being convicted for abusing his wife. And so, so the same breath, like we're always seeking this perfection. We're always seeking to have like the perfect answer. I am perfect. I don't see color. I don't see gender. And when we do that, we are not allowing the reality to come through. The reality is we are not perfect. We are imperfect, and we're working on it. We're a work in progress, and we have to hold up that mirror and show our biases all the time. So here's a final thought on that. And that is that the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. The most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And that was something that Steve Biko wrote. And with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to Asanda. And before that, while Asanda's sorting her slides out, I'm going to ask Griselda to launch a poll quickly and see whether anyone here has ever felt like they have been discriminated, and how that felt. Griselda, if you can go ahead and launch that, please. All right, we're at 70%. One or two more. I'm guessing if you're not answering, you probably have never experienced any discrimination. So, so that's good. That's awesome. And I want to learn more about how that happened. Okay, Griselda, you can go ahead and launch it. Okay.
Oh, wow.
What do you think, Asanda?
This is quite, it's quite huge. Discrimination being in females, like 61% is the highest one. As you were talking, that's like something that I realized that women have come a long way. And then we have discrimination for being a person of color, it's 29%, that's a big one as well. And also discrimination for being white. Wow. Like there's so many things that I had no idea, like that they did like happen to women. From your presentation just alone, there was so much learning from it. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, everyone.
Yeah.
We're going to follow up with a quick follow-up question. Griselda, do you want to launch into it quickly?
This is like actually a big one, being stereotyped because of the gender. I remember, just to share while people are going through it, I remember when I became a duty manager in the tourism space, how this guy, an African man, was so disrespectful towards me. And he was like, I'm not going to listen to a woman. I'm not going to be told what to do by a woman. And it took him a long time, actually, to come to terms that I was the duty manager, which was quite the worst experience, but I learned a lot from it. And also, I think that he learned along the way that women will be managers somehow. We are working towards that. We just need to accept that there will be that kind of equality, because we do have the skills to be those managers in those places. So this is quite interesting.
Absolutely. Okay. So we have quite a few people saying challenged, irritated. There is a limit on how many emotions we can write. So if your emotion wasn't on here, or if you have a word that encapsulates it better, please go ahead and pop it into the chat. But I noticed that challenged and irritated are coming up top, and then angry as well. So those three really are like sort of dominating. And it's interesting, I mean, from a workplace perspective, I mean, that's almost 90% of the respondents are saying irritated, challenged, and angry. From a workplace perspective, imagine what it's like to be working with a workforce who's feeling challenged, angry, and irritated. In terms of productivity, undermined, beautiful word, Mirai, thank you. Right, so from not only from a personal point of view, but from an organizational point of view and how we work together as teams, having having undermined, angry, and the last one I forgot now, having those emotions present is not super useful. Okay.
Definitely. Okay. Amazing. So just talking about how we feel when we're being stereotyped or discriminated against based on our gender, I've had like a recent experience, and just listening to Kim's presentation, I've learned quite a lot, because for me, I always thought that we just only dealing with like the inequality now, but it's been quite a thing that's been happening for so many years. And it looks like we're still going to work on it as women. So one thing that I've learned recently, I've had like an experience where I felt also like challenged, where I was challenged for being a woman because I was pregnant, and I felt like by a man told what to do, since I'm in this state, and that's the only way that I can do it. And I felt like, because it's a male dominated space, men, they tend to feel that they can actually, you know, make the decisions for you. But now I learned this transactional analysis, which helped me learn more about how I can control how I respond to certain situations. So transactional analysis model developed by Eric Benne claims that we can better understand ourselves by analyzing our transactions with the people closest to us. So from this is the model that he came up with, the 4 life positions. Please, Kim. So like when I looked at this model, I found it really interesting, because when we are working around this model, we're looking at when we in certain situations, whether at work or at home, where we're operating from, which box we're operating from. So like half the time I've been operating on I'm not okay, you are okay. So half the time I've been the oppressed person, and the other person has been the superior person, which goes back to what Steve Biko said, that it's in the power of it's in the mind of the oppressor, of the oppressed, how we view what we're going through. Either, like as I'm saying, at work as well, are we putting ourselves as the inferior person? Are we looking at ourselves as the superior person? And also when you look at the other one at the bottom there's certain situations where we feel like I'm not okay, you're not okay. So both of us, we're both passive, and we're both victims. We both feel like we're victimized in that space. And then we move like the box that we tend to move from I'm not okay, you're okay, or I'm not okay, you're not okay, to I'm okay, you're not okay. So that's in the I'm not okay, I'm okay, you're not okay. We tend to think that we can get rid of everyone. We're superior than everyone else, and everyone else below, like who's below us, is inferior. For example, as a woman in a male-dominated space, for example, you might be in a manager position, and your boss is a male. And then in that space, any female or any other people that are under you are inferior to you. All you're trying to do is just to get rid of them. But from my learnings from the situation is that I want to always be on the I am okay, you are okay. Because then it shows that we're actually working together. We want to move forward together. We're not focusing on the fact that I'm superior, you inferior, but we're focusing on I accept you as a person, the way that you are, and I also feel accepted as a person the way that I am. I have the skill set, I have the abilities as well. You also have the abilities. So when it comes to most situations, I believe that most people, they're always operating from I'm not okay, especially women. For example, we're like looking at this research that men, even though they don't know that they don't have the skills for a certain job, they would apply for that job. And then females, they're gonna say, I'm not okay, so I'm not gonna apply for that job because I don't qualify for it. But if you were to say to yourself, I'm okay, and they're also okay, and then you just apply, even though you know that you don't actually qualify for that job, but you trust that you're okay with that, even if you get the worst experience, then you get to move forward in life. So yeah, that's like the transactional analysis that I wanted to touch on today. Yeah, Kim?
Amazing, thank you. And I think the way that we came back with this, or the way that we came back to this model, because we've used it in the past, is that Asanda and I were in a board meeting, and I was like yada 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 yada, and Asanda was like being really quiet, and we had a debrief a few days later, and I was like, why were you so quiet? And she's like, I just felt like I'm not okay and you're okay. And I was like, you know what, actually on that day, I was actually having a really, really bad day, and I felt completely out of control. And I thought I wasn't okay. In my mind, I'm not okay and you were okay. And so what I was hoping was that you would be, like taking charge. And because you were quiet, I just blabbed because I know how to blab. And so we realized in certain situations, like in a board meeting where there's external pressure, we change. And yet when we're brainstorming or when we're sitting together or we're designing curriculum or something, we're always in the space of I'm okay, you're okay. And that space is where the magic happens. And we have to identify that, like, even we change in certain situations when we're under pressure from the outside. All right, so I thought it was really important to quickly talk about feminism, because whenever I talk about gender bias or racial bias, people go to me, oh, you're just a feminist. And I'm like, yeah, of course I'm a feminist, because I don't really think you know what feminism means. And this is, I think, what most people perceive of feminism, like angry lesbians with no bras, like violently demonstrating, right? And I think maybe that is like what my perception was when I was a lot younger as well. But in actual fact, feminism is simply the belief in full social, economic, and political equality for women. That's it. Like, simple. My son's a feminist. Like, he'll read, when we're reading stories, he'll say, Mom, what's a feminist? And I'm like, a feminist is that you believe women and men should be equal. Like, mom works and dad works. Mom does cleaning, dad does laundry. And he's like, oh yeah, of course, like that makes sense. He can't imagine a different way. So feminism is simply that men and women are equal, and that they're 50% of the population, 50% in theory could be in the workplace and also in the boardroom. So basically, feminism is I'm okay, you're okay. Like, that is the basic definition, or our way that we look at it. All right, so Aristotle had a quote that said, pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. And based on that little survey we did just now, where people felt like angry, irritated, out of control, disrespected, there was that other beautiful word that someone else said. And when you're in those situations, it's quite difficult to enjoy your job or to have pleasure. And ironically, when we enjoy our job, we get better at it. So finding the joy in job or in any work that you're pursuing is crucial to perfecting it. Now, Aristotle also had a model that I think is absolutely brilliant, and we're going to use it today so that you have some concrete tools to take away. So this is called the model of persuasion. And it's based off ethos, logos, and pathos. So ethos is your cred, right? Your credibility. Logos is your head, like the way you think, and pathos is your heart. So what he says is that when you are building an argument, it's important to start off with your credibility. So for example, at the beginning of this talk, Asanda read you my bio and I read you her bio. Why? Because I'm too embarrassed to read my own bio, because I'm not going to say that about myself, but it's important because it gives us credibility. And if you have credibility, if we have credibility, you're more likely to listen. The other thing is, I have a bunch of books here behind me. It's not by accident. It's to make you believe that I'm a reader, which I am, but I put them there instead of in the garage or anywhere else so that you know that I have credibility. You can also see my certificates there, and I put them there so that I have credibility. My title, what I've studied, my pursuits, what I'm interested in reading, all this strengthens my argument as a woman. And I have to be very, very purposeful in putting that front and center when I'm having an important conversation with someone. Okay, they include, for example, other things like my personal experience and my lived experience. So speaking from experience is really, really beneficial. The other thing that is part of the ethos is delivery. So for example, I'm looking at you as much as I can. I'm trying to have eye contact, right? If we're in person, I'm always going to be remaining strong in my eye contact. The way that I hold myself is going to be straight up and confident. You see, if I was talking to you like this and not keeping eye contact and my shoulders were hunched, it would tell you a lot more about my credibility, right? You would suddenly doubt, like, she doesn't look that confident. Does she even really know what she's talking about actually? The second part is the head, and that is the ability to debate or to form an argument. So we talk about benefits, facts, figures, data, numbers, statistics, scientific research, processes. As I started off our presentation, we had facts, figures, we had graphs, and all these things count because people are persuaded by data and by hard evidence. Finally, pathos, which is the heart. And these are mainly around stories or storytelling. So your ability to be a good storyteller, right? So to articulate positive and negative emotions, because the only way that we can connect with other humans is through emotions. So when we are listening to a sales pitch or when we're listening to a job interview, the only way we can connect with another human is through emotions. And things like rugby or music or going to the same college are attributed to certain emotions. And because a person had that experience or was able to storytell in a way, you can connect better with them. So nurturing those three things, ethos, logos, and pathos, make women better at being persuasive at work and being able to hold the space in a male-dominated environment. And after all, there is this amazing saying that perception is reality. If you perceive yourself as credible and worthy, then others will perceive you as credible and worthy. And like Asanda said, if you say, I'm okay, and you're okay, perception is reality. Now, we've made some awesome worksheets for you to go and fill in as your assignment. So you can see there, this is all about persuasive communication. And the first bit is about ethos. The second one is about logos. The third one is about pathos and how to weave a good storytelling aspect. And finally, we've included a emotions and a feelings wheel. Now, that emotions and feeling wheel is super, super important, because when we connect with people, we can only do it through our emotions and through articulating it, okay? So, and often women are scared to share how they're feeling because it makes us seem weak. But in fact, it's useful to be able to storytell in that way. Now, for those of you who read or watched the video that we shared out, Sheryl Sandberg, she is a thought leader in women, and especially women at executive level in organizations. She's the CEO of Facebook. And in her talk, she talks about why women, the 3 reasons why women, or what we can do to keep women working. And I encourage you to watch that video and to take note. This is a study that she did with McKinsey that shows sort of an entry level, that it's pretty 50-50, like let's say men and women, bearing in mind this is in the US. At a manager level, you can see it goes slightly more towards men. Senior manager goes slightly more, and by the time you get to the C-suite, it's almost entirely men. And in South Africa, our statistics are very, very similar. Now, what's interesting in her talk is that she also talks about success and likability. A man who is successful is liked. A woman who is successful is not liked. And this is an excellent Harvard Business Review or Harvard Business School study where they changed the name of a successful woman. Her name was actually Heidi. And they changed it in 50% of the cases into Howard. And in the end, Heidi was said to be competent and an incredible businesswoman, but I don't want to work for her and I don't really like her. But Howard, the exactly the same story, exactly the same words. He's competent and I want to work for him. I really like him. And so the study showed us that men who are successful are liked and women who are successful are not liked, let's say, as much. Now, what is the point? Like, what is the point of having these discussions? Well, the first is to make women who are working in a male-dominated environment feel more confident. But why would that help the organization? Now, you don't need to look very far to find loads of data to tell you that throughout the organization, from the entry level right until the board, the more equal or the more diverse it is, the better the business does. And there are loads of papers and academic journals and Harvard Business Review articles and McKinsey reports that describe exactly why. Like, for example, the top 50 companies on the Fortune 500 have diverse, like there's a direct correlation between more women on the board equals better profits. Because when there are more women and when there's that critical mass, women feel that they can contribute, they have a seat at the table. And why are their thoughts important? Because our target markets are 50% women. And in purchasing power, when it comes to purchasing power, for example, in travel, women hold over 80% of the purchasing power. And yet critical decisions that have to do with pricing, marketing, placement, product are often made by men. And so when there's a diversity, there is a financial benefit, which makes it worthwhile discussing for any organization. So some final takeaways before we wrap up. Firstly, remember that bias is not good or bad, it just is. Focus on the positive. So you will face challenges as you master a male-dominated workplace. Is it fair? Absolutely not. But focusing on the positive can help put your challenges into perspective. So have courageous conversations. And I encourage you to have a look at our WhatsApp bot, Laura. We have a whole little section on courageous conversations and how to start broaching those in a constructive way. When we attack people for their biases, they will defend and attack back. And in the end, the outcome won't change. So the second point is find a group of women who can support you. So whether you are the only woman in your organization or if there's a handful of women in your department, find a strong group of women who can support you. Now, women groups is a bias that I have also had. In my mind, when women get together, it's to like Skinner and drink tea and like, have a book club or drink wine. But it can be so much more powerful than that. And in the last 2 years, I've really lent into women's groups and tried to create circles around us where you can participate. So we have Khwela circles. We do these online using WhatsApp, where you can learn from other women's stories and share your own story. If you want to, you could even start your own Khwela story, your own Khwela circle with women either in your workplace or friends, for example. Sharing this space with women will boost your confidence. Another thing to do is join Facebook groups, for example, Women in STEM or South African Women in Technology. Join LinkedIn discussions. Start seeking out other women and other women who will support you. Keep your eye on role models. So it can be quite overwhelming if you don't have anyone to be your role model, but you have to look for them because like me, I'm very confident and yet I'm still not that confident to tell my whole life story. So sometimes you don't know who amongst you has walked the walk. So seek them out. Find women in your organization, ask them to go for a coffee. Follow people on LinkedIn, follow people on Instagram who are thought leaders and who work in male-dominated spaces and see how they tackle things. Listen to podcasts, for example. Number 4, seek out men who can be allies. So even if fields are heavily dominated, there are men who are wanting to be allies for women. So look for them and don't be afraid to ask them for mentorship and advice. I have had many mentors in my life, especially as a younger woman, and most of them were much, much older and very successful men. And I must have asked maybe 30 and maybe only 5 said yes, but those 5 put so much time and energy into sharing what they knew with me. It made me into a much better and more resilient businesswoman. And they were generous with their time. So seek them out. Some will say no, but others will say yes. And I encourage you to seek out mentors who are different. So I will go out of my way to seek out someone who is completely different in the way that I think, but very successful in the particular field. And you can recognize them because they are the people who listen and amplify your opinions and thoughts during meetings. They speak up when they see gender bias. They go out of their way to praise your work in front of other colleagues and they advocate for you. That's how you'll know who these men are. Second last point is to speak your truth and sit at the table. Use the persuasive communication tool to formulate important discussions and seek opportunities to share your thoughts and contribute to the conversation. Take a seat at the table. No one is going to offer it to you. Pull out a chair and take a seat. So invest time in reading and getting curious about your industry, informing and expressing your opinions. Use the Khwela Mentor Bot to learn more tools to express yourself and get used to sharing your emotions as a way to connect. It's not a weakness. My final takeaway is design your career and your private life. Choose to nurture an equal relationship. Talk about childcare and household chores as well as financial planning and income with your partner. Or if you're a single parent, start designing your life. You need support. Women have got 3 jobs, actually, normally. Household chores, childcare, and a job. But there is a way to share that. Understand the choices you make and the trade-offs. And if you want to pursue a career in a male-dominated environment, start planning for it now. Who will you share the tasks with? Who's going to look after the children when there's an important meeting at 7 p.m. on a Friday? All these things can be designed. They just take time and a lot of begging. So these are our takeaways. And I want to say thank you so much. We are pretty much bang on time. And Asanda, I'd love to hear your thoughts before we wrap up.
As you're saying, talking about all the takeaways, I'm like, this is really, really insightful, especially the perception is the truth. Because it's stories that we tell ourselves. It's how the world, like how the world's gonna show, like that's what we're gonna get from the world. Just want to say also I've learned quite a lot. Also from people's comments here, how there was one that says, in Xhosa, this is a huge belief that I'm not gonna listen to a woman. And we have a long way to actually break those down, and it starts with us. They say that charity begins at home. So we need to find ourselves also in that box of I'm okay, you're okay. And then moving forward, we can be able to take that seat at the table, plan, use that persuasion model. So it was really insightful, Kim. Thank you so much. I've actually learned so much, even though I've been working with women for 3.5 years, but now I feel like I've been taken to a place where I was, I don't know, introduced for the first time to to the challenges that women went through and the history and where we're going as women. So this was really insightful. Someone is calling us Kimanda.
I love it.
I love it too. So this was really brilliant. And yeah, thank you so much for that. And thank you to everyone that's actually showed up today. And I believe that you've taken so much as I have as well. Yeah. And we're having like Lucinda saying she is really provided me with food for thought that shifted a train of thought. Yeah, it has shifted mine as well. I'm in a total different space than I was before I attended this masterclass today. Yeah.
Amazing. Please go ahead and share with us how you're feeling right now. And I'm really excited to see how you can use the tools for the assignment, that persuasive tool, and the I'm okay, you're okay. We're going to give you all that for your assignment and help you draft a strong persuasive discussion on anything that you're passionate about, breaking everything down. So I can't wait to see what you come up with and to hear your thoughts. Eminently, I'll share them with you. It is part of the Mbokoro sort of course, but I'll share them with you directly. Okay, amazing. And so let's see, Griselda, where are we at with the barometer checkout? How's everyone feeling? 70%, okay. Let's get up to the 100% now. You know, I reflected yesterday with a friend of mine. She said, Kim, you know, you always use these big words to say how you are. How are you? I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I'm excited, I'm elated. And she's like, I always just say I'm fine. Because in my language, we say kunjani wena, ndipili lenkosi. She said it's like a song. Kunjani wena, ndipili lenkosi, kunjani wena, ndipili lenkosi. So we're like almost trained to just always say, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And we reflected like how powerful it is when you use like actual words that are different, and how we have to it takes so much to just not say, I'm fine. Yeah. Actually, let me check in and see how I'm feeling. All right.
Exactly. And it's more like owning that emotion or that feeling. As you said, that doesn't make us weak, but it just shows that we're owning how we're actually feeling at that moment.
Yeah.
Instead of saying I'm okay.
All right. So, Asanda, you want to take us through the poll results?
Yes, please. Okay, so we have the one that's at the top there, it's 46% confident. That's amazing. And then we have connected, open, curious, excited and open, So it looks like everyone is feeling so much better than they were when they joined. And then we have 4% people that say they felt tired. So this is brilliant.
I think Gamelikle had a really good point. She said, can we talk about how men sexualize women too one day? I can't even wear jeans. That's a very deep insight there. And I'd love to invite you to collaborate with us, and perhaps we can co-create that content together.
Yeah.
It sounds like you have a story there that is worth listening to and sharing.
It's also weird that she's sharing that now, because remember the last week or this week, beginning of this week, when we were talking about women wearing the burqa, and how they still, even though they've covered the entire body, they still get sexualized. So it is quite a topic that will be interesting to explore. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Lucinda. She said she doesn't wear shorts. I think we should do another. Do another workshop where we can open up that discussion, because I think it looks like it really needs some airtime and some discussion.
Yes.
Right. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating today. And I wish you a bright and beautiful day. And we look forward to seeing you at the next masterclass.